This video is about effective listening.
One of the greatest misunderstandings of pastors when it comes to counseling is that counseling is about talking. Counseling is first of all about listening. In this lesson, we're going to talk about how we can become more effective listeners to people and less of talkers. Let the Holy Spirit lead you, but first of all, let Him lead you to listen.
Okay, let's talk about the process of listening. It has three phases. First of all, to passively collect data by active listening. The purpose of listening is so that we can understand what's going on. So we have to take time to collect that data. Second, rephrase what is said and felt by the person who is speaking. Learn to check back with them to understand what you're talking about by rephrasing what is said and also what is felt by them in a counseling session. And third, to summarize what is said. When they have finished talking, rephrase and summarize what they've said back to them to help focus their attention on what the problem is. The first stage is to collect data through active listening. Now, what do I mean by active listening? Well, there are three ways of listening. One way is to listen with our ears alone. And this is frankly what most people do. While the other person is talking, they're thinking about what they want to say back to them. So they're only partially listening. The information is going in their ear, but they're not paying attention because their minds are thinking about what they say. Second, they pay attention with only part of their brain. And when we're counseling, we don't want to do that. We want to give full attention to the person's talking. So we don't want to be thinking about what we're going to say back. The second way of listening is to listen with our eyes and our ears. Not only are we focusing our ears on them, but we're also focusing our eyes upon them. We are looking them straight in the eyes, straight in the face, and paying attention to their facial expressions and their gestures. If when we're talking, somebody is talking, their words and their gestures or their facial expressions don't match up, then we know that something is wrong. If a person is telling us they're so sad and they're smiling while they're doing it, something is wrong. Or if their face is blank and there is no expression, something is wrong. And this tells us that we need to go further. We need to observe their gestures and their facial expressions. We also need to focus attention on what is being done by them as well as what is being said by them. We need to pay attention if they're picking things up. And we also need to be paying attention to what they do not say as well as what they say. What subjects are they leaving out? Which brings me to my third point, which is we need to listen with our whole self, including our brains, using our eyes and ears while analyzing with our minds what is being said. If we're listening to a person and we notice that they are avoiding an issue, we need to call attention to that and make note of it. If we're listening to a person and we notice that they have trouble saying words or they have trouble talking about some things, they're pausing a lot, then this tells us something. Or if there are certain things that they get very excited about, this tells us something. As they're talking, we're analyzing, looking beneath the surface to see if we can tell what's really going on. Now, that involves a process of following their way of thought. The process of listening is a process of empathy, and empathy means that we get outside of our own brains and get inside to theirs, outside of our own thought processes and into theirs. We need to constantly saying, do I really understand what this person is saying or how this person is thinking or where their mind is going? That is so important that we not only see the word and hear their voices, but see it from their perspective as well. We need to give full attention to our client while we're talking to them. We don't need to be paying attention to anything else, only to them. Now, there are different ways that we can completely listen. The first thing that we need to do is to remove all distractions from the room. Make sure that there's no one else or nothing else that's talking while we're trying to talk to them. Be quiet. Don't play music while we're talking, or don't play a television in the background. Talk to them simply and completely. Seek a private, personal place where they are able to talk and be alone. We don't need to be counseling in a crowd. We need to do it one-on-one in a quiet place. And if we're in an impromptu counseling session, we pull them aside, talk to them some other place. Maintain eye contact throughout the entire session. Focus your eyes, your attention upon them and then alone. Use empathetic words and gestures. That is, as they're talking, respond back to them with head nods, with open body stances, with sympathetic facial expressions that encourage them to keep talking, and don't shut them up. Do not interrupt or dominate the speaker. Don't use wide sweeping hand gestures that dominate. Don't stop in the middle and say, "Oh, but you mean this, don't you?" Don't interrupt at all. If it takes them a long time to say something, don't fill in the blanks. Just let them talk. Don't probe needlessly for details. Oftentimes when we're listening to somebody talk and we get into what they're saying, we may get curious and we may wonder about, where did this happen, or how did this come about? And if it isn't germane to what they're trying to tell, don't probe. Just let them talk and speak in their own words and at their own time and space. And avoid self-disclosing statements at this point. Don't jump in and say, "You think you have problems, let me tell you about mine," or "Yeah, I had that earlier and it was terrible." Don't talk about yourself at all. Let them be the subject of the conversation. Let your words be you instead of I. If you catch yourself using I a lot, then you're using it too much. At this point, it should simply be about them. There will be times later where you might want to use some own examples from your own life, but this is not the time. Right now, you're gathering your data to be able to talk to them later. Rephrasing is the next. Phrasing is listening with our ears, but it means that we rephrase what is said and listen for affirmation from the speaker. For example, "Now what I heard you say was this," and then wait for them to say, "Yes, that's what I meant." Or, "Did I hear you right when I heard you say?" And they say, "Yes, that is what I said." Focus on feelings as well as speech. Don't just reflect back what they said, but reflect back what they felt as well as what they said, because we want them to probe how they felt as well as what is said. So say things like this: "How did it make you feel when he said that?" And wait for them to tell you. "I sensed that made you angry. Am I right?" Now let me give you some cautions about rephrasing that you need to avoid. First of all, do not put thoughts or feelings in people's minds, but wait for them to express them. Don't say, "I'll bet that made you angry, didn't it?" No, don't say that. Let them express that. Just ask them, "How did that make you feel?" Do not move forward until you are sure you've got their thoughts and feelings right. In other words, don't rush through the story. Let them take all the time they need to make sure that you understand what they are trying to say. Third, do not make judgments about what is said until all the information is before you. You don't need to be judgmental at this point. All you need to do is to find out what's really going through their mind. At this point, you want to be non-judgmental and not lay guilt upon them. Otherwise, they may shut up and not tell you what you need to hear. Do not assume that a causal effect relationship exists between actions and feelings. Let me give you an example of that. Don't say, for example, "Well, I'll bet he really made you angry, didn't he?" Because that patient, that client, may not know what really made them angry. You're putting into their mind that the anger came from what somebody said or did to them, and that's not necessarily the case. Instead, say, "When that happened, you felt anger. Is that right?" That's a more appropriate response because it doesn't put the blame on the other guy for making them angry, but it simply acknowledges that that anger exists and that you can later explore how and why. The third step is summarizing. Why should we summarize? That is to state back the whole picture of what they gave. Well, there are several reasons for it. First of all, because summarizing simply makes sure that we have the story right. We say, now let me tell you if I get this story straight. And then you tell them and they say, is that what I understand? And they say, yes. This way we know that we've got the story right to their satisfaction. Second, as we're summarizing, we're also restructuring the problem. We're beginning to put a new story, a new face, a new narrative with that problem. And we are helping them to construct that problem in a way that can be solved. And finally, as we summarize, we're also simplifying the problem. We're getting down to the basics that can be dealt with later. The process of listening, remember, is to passively collect data by active listening, to rephrase what is said and felt, and to summarize what is said.
Many times when people come into my office, they really don't want me to say much. They just need somebody to listen. Be a listener to people, and God will use that listening skill to help other people grow closer to Him.